will also live there. Um, but it's great to see everyone. Let me be on focus mode. All right. It's great to see everybody. I am Carly Schnitzler, she, her pronouns, and with Lillian Yvonne Bertram, we've been running If Then Technology and Poetics programming since 2020. Um, Monthly workshops. I think many, if not all of you, have been to one of these before, but if you're new, it's lovely to see you. I'm really happy that you're here. Um, this is the last workshop of 2025, but it's not the last If Then event. We have our open mic happening in early or mid-December, December 12th, I believe. That's also on the agenda. And I know Covey and I know David Reeder are going to share some stuff. And Alex Lee, who I think is here too. I think they're going to share some stuff. So I'm really excited about that. Um, there's 3 more spots if you want to claim one of them or also just come and hear the wonderful work of what we're up to. As with all if thens, like remember, we're first and foremost people in bodies, so do whatever you need to do to uh, be comfortable, take breaks, get up, get a snack, go to the bathroom, um, and do what you need to do to like make yourself feel good in the space that you're in right now. Um, Go ahead. People are saying hi in the chat. Just say hi. Continue that train. If there's any updates or exciting things folks want to share, like the chat is your space to do that, in addition to just unmuting is an informal space. Um, yeah, I think that's all my housekeeping. But I'm really excited that Kyle is here with us today. Kyle is a scholar practitioner whose research and creative work explore the algorithmic mediation of human thinking and especially poetic thinking. And as I said earlier, his most recent book is Gems, which is a book of poetry written with and against 9 different algorithmic word gems designed to make writing more strenuous. So get ready. We're going to do one of them today. And Kyle, I'm excited you're here.
Thank you so much, Carly. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to the screen is visible, right? That says gyms.
Yes, it's looking
Okay,
great.
great. I'll start then. This world is passing away along with its desires. Hunger and the broad pampa in which we graze it are falling away into an even flatter zone, along with our wish to want, along with that low flavor. This world is passing away along with its desires. along with its prestigious cups, with its elegant manner of pouring them. Our helike is floating away. This world is passing away along with its desires. This world is passing away along with desire's many airtight storehouses, letting air and light in to thresh that honeycomb. Hunger and the broad pampa in which we graze it are falling away into an even flatter zone, along with our wish to want, along with that low flavor. Though we suffer hunger in its broad pampa, they are falling even splatter zone, tandem gripping our wish to want, tandem gripping that low eros. Hunger and the broad pampa in which we graze her are falling away into an even flatter zone, along with our wish to want, along with that low flavor. Hunger, who leaves something in the bowl, and the biodynamic pampa in which we graze her, are Icarusing down upon an even leaner zone, alongside our dry humping on hope, alongside any low flavor or flavor's remainder. Verdant expansion. Jenny Beck. Bosky expansion was more representational, about 60% representational, 30% abstract. A small copse halfway through meiosis into convex hull, 60% of the time, or for 60% of viewers, or from 60% of angles, obviously trees. Verdant is only 15% representational. Cucumber, laurel, anemone, crown. Because the former, so gloomy and tuberous, has the trick where if you pick up the bottom, comes off and shows you a sneaky coral butt, umbrageous. The two jaws of a fly trap, the two lobes of an engine block, but one slightly in front of and tilted against the other, tubes, three from one side, two from the other, seem like delivery pumpules into the ground or table or plinth or whatever, totally flush. So it does really look like they are going in, continuing down. Impressive. An undomesticated Bluetooth speaker with 30-ish aloe ridge rows and three chubby feet, gyring itself contentedly, like purring. A wadded up frog dipped in frog smoother, vertigo-inducing gradient, deep green within the two circular vents, accelerating to body, light lime, then lime white towards the bottom, as well as near the maxima of the bigger bumps. Smallest piece in the series. I chose to disregard my argument of the Lutheran Johann Marbach of Strasbourg, having grown suspicious of him within me and his urge to reform spirit through spittled argument. Let spirit be beshaped by matter. Reform matter instead. With one big hammer or many tiny brass second estate swords. But grief. There is still a cup of Marbach in me for each 3 quarts of other liquid, a roiling soup, an indigestion broth drunk from inside, and, like water drunk from such cups, as well as imported powders and extracts from lignum nephriticum. It does, if I flatter myself, furnish a useless blue light, bluish and dim as Frederick Erdmann's prospects of inheriting or ruling jointly over Curtin. But rule he did, through some luck of disease, who would have been a great painter of Muscovite Russia, who influenced the 15th century painting style of the Novgorod school and the subsequent Moscow school, did not become so. Instead, lingered in Byzantium to juggle breasts. Instead, was innixed and later interred in the words of Kharkiv or somewhere near. Trinitarianly, the fool, the victim, the laureate make 3 sides of the same cloud, the same nonglum, that egg that never quite reigns, but one day will show us what it can do. Poesy is a gardener, and its cottage is privacy. And this cottage mustn't let itself be sensed behind the jessamine scrim. And its art is losing our mind forged bracelets in its real ass iris beds. And its useful assistant is word processing. And its large pot is filled with readings and edible scraps, corn cobs, and wing bones, topped off with gray water. And this pot does cook by lunar induction. Doubt is a yacht, and its grand saloon is where one labors in rough linen to appear the smirking sophisticate. And its deck is flat experience, where one might take a circular walk. And its prow is what cuts ignorance at each moment into speed, confidence. And its locomotive engines are a few sadnesses gone mad with utility. Thank you so much for listening and for coming. This ends the reading portion of today. What I thought would be honestly fun for me to do for the rest of this time, because there's so many people, really, thanks for coming. There's so many people I can see um, that I don't get the chance to talk with that much. I would love for us to have a conversation. And maybe just to start it out, I'll just express my anxiety about this moment where sorting out my relationship to uh, computation, uh, which didn't seem so problematic 5 years ago in the pre-chat GPT, or some number of years ago in the pre-chat GPT days, suddenly feels very problematic to me. And GEMS is one way of kind of working through that anxiety, perhaps. Um, but I'd like to hear how other people are doing. And so to that end, I created a small gym for our conversation. I'll put it in the chat. Um, I think that what should happen is that you should see I'll just briefly describe it. There are some notes. I made a few notes of things we might talk about, things that I tend to think about when thinking about the question of what is writing now, what's going wrong with it, what is the right way to relate our minds to computation in this era of AI. So I've got some notes here, and every minute or so, two of them are juxtaposed, and there's a note at the bottom that you can see is trying to invite us to think about these two things at the same time. Um, okay, I think I will stop there and let the gym, if you want to lead the conversation, if you want to start us off, someone could do that. I would really appreciate it. And if you want to riff on the gym, that's great. And if you want to not riff on the gym, that's great too. Okay, I will stop sharing because I think everyone has I'll post the link again one more time so everyone will have the link.
But where to start then? Can I?
Please, John, start us off. I was hoping you'd start us off, John. I can't see, but I can hear you.
I just wanted to say something about Kyle's project that struck me recently in relation to AI and specifically chatbot AI. And that is like a reversal of the prompt response relation, right? In other words, we're typically when we relate to models via whatever paraphernalia they have in front of them, you start with you prompt it, and then it gives you a response, which you can continue, you can continue transacting with. But it's not often that you start with that it prompts you, and that's what Kyle's project does. And seeing as it's so there's it's weird that that seems to me sort of more productive in terms of better thinking, better writing, but it's also a problem in that it sort of highlights the supposed agential aspect of models as if they have their own agency, which is I don't think is right. And I think is one of the most problematic they're one of their more problematic aspects. So anyway, I really like what Kyle is doing for the reason of that reversal of the transaction of the um, and uh, and that's my comment. And I'd love him to talk about that a little bit maybe, or to hear other people talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, John. I also, um, yeah, maybe a kind of provocative phrase that I've been kind of trying out in my head that I'm really not comfortable with, and you'll see immediately why I'm not comfortable um, with it. Is that I look out in the squares here, and I think about all the people in the chat right now and not in the chat right now that I've learned from, and that especially under the banner of computer generated text as an art form, including you, John. And I feel like I've been moving in a direction of, maybe the gems are sometimes funny, but I think of them as purely utilitarian. So I've been kind of making a rule for myself, like always make sure that the computer generated text, which is like this infinite 3D printed styrofoam concrete thing, is being used in a utilitarian fashion, that I'm not, um, that I'm making use of it. But I'm not super satisfied with that. I'm obviously really uncomfortable with that because it would seem to um, preclude me from, enjoying the beauty of computer generated text. And yeah, I guess I'm wondering what you think about the fate of computer generated text in this moment, where for most people who had no idea what computer generated text was um, 5 years ago, now they have one idea, and their idea is that it's this really evil thing. I talk to my colleagues, I talk to my students all the time. It's a really evil thing to them. And I get why they're saying that. Um, where does where do we land in this moment? How do we talk to people who, their one experience of computer generated text is um, the evil thing we're all thinking of?
Is it true that everybody you talk to thinks it's evil?
Yeah, I have a lot of conversations that are very there. It hasn't come up. I don't think it's come up. I don't think the gyms are syncing that well. That's why I put it back on the screen. But there was one that I was looking at today. It was a tweet by getting his name, temporary author, and it's something to the effect of, I tell my students, if you ever use Chat GPT for anything that has to do with thinking or writing, you are like disappointment to God or something like this. And it's and I hear that that sentiment, maybe not quite as uh, maybe a little bit softer, a little bit more muted than that. But that's the impression I get. I feel like we're in a moment of real disgust. I think a lot of people are really disgusted with the idea of computer generated text. That's the impression I get.
Well, the calling it slop doesn't hurt with the disgust element of it all.
I'll say something about that. I've been thinking a lot about how this moment with AI feels so much like it rhymes so much with mid late 90s when the internet and web came out. The hype, the concern, everything. I mean, the singularity, back then it was Y2K. I mean, there's just so many kind of rhymes in, I'm old enough to kind of remember all that. And so I just wanted to say I was looking quickly. Of course, I asked Perplexity, like, can you give me a quick, lit review of like critiques of hypertext? And there was a lot of concern about hypertext corrupting literacy, getting us to think in fragmented ways,
Mhm.
corrupting our ability to think, long form. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, there's just an interesting potential parallel
Mhm.
with some of the critiques today and what was going on 30 years ago.
I'd be interested to connect that thread with the work I got. Yeah, great to hear you read. So nice to see you all. Mine is like the Wall Street Journal wonders if AI will widen the gap between superstars and everybody else. What might mere randomization have to do with neoliberal competition? It was a very serendipitous prompt because one of the ways I've been thinking about that problem is first like, okay, we have good relationships with computer generated text. There's artistic computer generated text that we love, that we've produced, moved by, or maybe one's interest is purely theoretical and analytical, but that's not my experience. So what is it you're trying to reconstruct, right? And so a lot of work is trying to reconstruct maybe a kind of more ecological, small scale, weird approach to computer generated text. Everest Pipkin's work is my kind of exemplar and an inspiration in that direction. But one thing really interesting about Jim's that you're critically and at a distance, but you are reconstructing poetic virtuosity with computer generated text, right? The notion of collaboration, yes, we all need to work through like what kinds of collaboration could exist that aren't proletarianizing and all the rest of it. Um, but I don't mean this as an accusation or anything, but with the John Ashbery parts and with other aspects of it, it is a twist on this discourse of excellence, frankly, that surrounds the vision sold to us by use of AI and AI text, but it moves in a different direction. And the without going on about it, the connection I want to make there that more people in this room, I think, get than in a lot of other rooms. But that the not just as a call to urgency, but that the sort of decentering of a artistic aesthetic tradition. Yes, we're all in lived modernity together. Yes, all the traditions overlap. Yes, nothing's European, nothing's anywhere else. But I think in the background, the decentering of the solipsism of a, let's say, Anglophone political economy and the cultural and aesthetic association institutions associated with it. My reaction as a stranger to those questions in certain ways, reading contemporary literature, tiny bit of exposure to India, but not a deeper embeddedness in the questions of technology and language as thought from East Asia, is that it's more disorienting than we think. So that's where I don't take comfort in the like we live through the internet and the personal computer. In the first hand, I don't think we live through the internet and social media, not because of the technologies themselves, but because of the
Yeah.
Silicon Valley political economy and the people around it and all the freaks and ghouls. Um, but also in that broader sense that like broader thing, whatever you want to call it, that is more okay. I'll make the connection with virtuosity. Finish there. I think notions of civilizational stuff, and then also like traditional culture, whether they're conservative or progressive, when it's like a pretty standard canon-like notion of our traditional culture as Peruvians and this kind of thing, is in the zeitgeist. Not so much here, but in that global conversation. And so I don't know, just that sort of jumble of thoughts and about like reconstructing this, like making really excellent poetry in relation to algorithms, but there's also a problem that an interesting, helpful problem there that's maybe more addressable if the notions of poetic virtuosity and excellence are not just sort of, you know, Euro-Western ones.
Sure. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And um I think you're absolutely right. But okay, so given that, Kavi, like um what should we build? We're in this room. We're people who build a lot of things. What should we write? We're people in this room who write a lot of things. What would be maybe another way of putting that? Yeah, you're right. So the gyms concept is it's also, I mean, it implies a certain, stronger, weaker, for sure. That's a problematic scale that I think what you just said would also place under critique in a really powerful way. Um, it is maybe you could say an attempt to write well is to force oneself to write well is maybe one antidote to slop. So slop versus attempt at least at some kind of, maybe it's like a self-conscious sort of virtuosity, but that's the aim for sure. What's another, if it's not virtuosity, what's another word that we might use as like a target? Um, yeah.
I mean, Daniel's saying craft, Morgan is saying we put more value into something that's had more effort put into it. And related to the comment that John opened us with, I mean, something that I admire about this project is like how much friction it introduces. And maybe friction is like, friction feels more of like like there's like a spectrum of friction and frictions and how friction is taken up by a user, or a writer, as opposed to like the stronger, weaker.
Mhm.
Yeah, and even just like the decentering part, I think is what I wanted. Not because I I love John Ashbery's poetry. It's not a complaint in any sense,
Sure.
problematic or not, or challenging or not. It's just that notion of like, what should we build when we don't like? I think it does matter a lot if it's not just in relation to the faculty in the building next to ours. I know I'm simplifying. I know the faculty in the building next to ours is still central, but I think that just those implicit cultural questions of sort of relation and difference in industry, I guess,
I
change
think
how we collaborate around it without like it's maybe moving a step away from innovation and more like reinvention or something.
I'm totally hearing what you're saying, Kavi, and I'm trying to flip through gyms and think, what are the moments that where I feel like maybe what I was going for is more simpatico with what you are imagining. And I'm looking through some of uh, allusion injector poems. I won't hold it up to, I think the camera will make it so you can't see the words. But I'm looking at some of these references to Wikipedia articles that are about things that I don't know about. Some of them are very, you might say, Eurocentric, and some of them really aren't. Some of them are pushing me to think about, in one poem that I didn't read, I get pushed to think about a certain period in the history of China, which I know nothing about because I'm, For John Cayley, this would not be much of a stretch at all. For me, it was a big stretch, because it's something I'm so ignorant of. So I feel like that is one sort of thought that I have in relationship to this sort of work that is not maybe under the banner of excellence. I just want to be brought into connection with the things that the ideas, the possibilities of thought that are so beyond me because of my limitations, including those, you know, Eurocentric English majory ones that you were, I think, very rightly pointing to. Um, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I I wanted to say something quickly
Yeah.
about virtuosity, right? So there's and there have been comments about the amount of effort that if we see evidence of effort, then we admire that. But we also admire accumulation, which may not be
Mm,
particularly virtuosic or you know, of the moment. And then when we admire maintaining a relation, like maintaining a relation to the discourse that you're involved in, maintaining a relation to poetry, not just
mm,
thinking that you're a genius and, you know, whatever. And that sort of brought me back to gyms because the gyms, it's implied that because you're getting a prompt from the algorithm or an algorithm or indeed a model, that you will respond as a human, right?
right.
But you don't have to. You could go to another model that was with you and respond as somebody prompting another model, which would point out the nature of a broken relationship. Like you're trying to establish a relationship with algorithmic production or algorithmic searching to give you
Mm,
random,
mhm,
non-centered culture, right?
mhm.
And then if you maintain it, then it becomes very productive. If you don't maintain it, it just immediately descends into what we tend to let it descend into, allowing us to do. And that sort of temporal relationship is something that the thing doesn't have. They have context windows, but they don't have time. Whereas what you do with a gym is yours, and it's in your time, and it's part of your time. Another aspect. And virtuosity, we normally think of as being instantaneous. I'm a genius, so I can do it now. I can show it.
Mhm.
But you know, it might take me years.
One of the things I'm thinking about
Yeah.
as folks are, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, please, please.
It's just ideas of authorship, which has sort of come up in implicit ways. And, I think everyone in this chat would probably, of course, push back against those ideas of authorship as the great genius sits down at the desk and that, obviously those things are uh, problematic. And I think one of the questions that I have as folks are talking about sort of the big LLM issue and whether or not it's evil, what happens when we're encouraged to put those ideas of single authorship, which are problematic when applied to people, onto this thing that's been constructed from all this other text? Because we are encouraged to think about these things as authors, that the text that is coming from them, it's not written by all the people whose stuff was fed into ChatGPT. It's written, quote, by ChatGPT. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting about this project and about smaller computer generated text products in general is that instead they foreground ideas of distributed authorship. And like I really enjoyed during your reading, Kyle, that you were talking like it was a conversation with your lovely assistant, so to speak, right? That it was this back and forth, which decentered yourself as author. It also, like, the process was laid bare. That's another thing with a lot of these LLMs in terms of the evil, like they're black boxes. And so one of the things that your text here linked is Alison Parrish. And one of the great things about Alison Parrish's project is she says, hey, look, here's how I did this. And that's an interesting part of the project as well. Whereas these large scale LLMs, they're hidden deliberately because that's where the money is, right? So I don't know. I think that maybe part of what we're thinking about here is getting back to ideas of authorship and computer co-authorship, um, and where we sort of center that idea of power in authorship.
Yeah, I love that, and I'm sure um, many of us are familiar with Allison's really wonderful thinking about working with corpora such as the Gutenberg uh, corpus, which has been so important to her work and many other people's work. But yeah, that what you said, Travis, about the kind of there, in one of the notes, I think it's the one you're referring to. There's something about Allison's work that really shows it seems by reading it, you kind of are invited to start thinking like a machine reading algorithm, specifically in the case of our arrival, and certainly, you know, uh, John Cayley and Daniel C. Howe are here too. The Reader's Project. I don't know if you've seen the Reader's Project note in the conversation, Jim, but another work that makes me not forget about or kind of lays bare some of the seams of computation. I have a note on my screen about reinforcement learning with human feedback. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's something people are interested in, but yeah, this thorny question of model alignment, um, of values. Um, one thing I've been trying to think about sort of unsuccessfully is, where does that sort of, um, what pre, um, LLM, maybe digital language art has aspects that maybe remind me of reinforcement learning, where there's something going on that's about, in a way, disciplining the model and, or maybe that's not the only way to put it, but having some kind of ethical exchange. John maybe be uncomfortable with those terms, but you know what I'm getting at, something that is at least a looks like that. I'm just riffing on the gyms here, or the gym.
Yeah, and the thing it almost reminds me of a little bit more than gyms is something like climbing or biking, where it's kind of pulling you to be in this world in a well, I don't know. Maybe I pull back from that because part of what's so hopeful about the intervention is that the gym is a bit like an elliptical, where like we're not saying to focus so much on the machinery, but the thing it gives you access to. But I'm just making the point that the thing it gives you access to is like more variegated and satisfying than I
Mhm.
find running in place to be.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Kavi, and it relates to the what John was saying about. I will just say that these gyms were very grueling, and they were much, and basically none of them I enjoyed writing, and they all felt very much like being under the squat bar and feeling not very good at it, and maybe some days a little bit better than others. But it was very stressful and not a kind of effortless elliptical like feeling. But yeah, I like what John was positing about just something like practice, something like just doing it every day. Um, I I think that would be a somewhat different project than the one that I did. That would be about helping you do it every day, making it feel good for your mind's body, the way that you can kind of get addicted to the kind of swoopy, swooshy feeling of the elliptical. It feels good. It feels like you're this kind of gigantic bionic gazelle. And I really like that feeling in a way that I did not like any writing with any of the gems. I would, yeah. So I like this. I don't know. I'm just saying that I really love this idea of thinking about how do you make writing more a part of people's lives by making it. If this project was all about friction, maybe friction's not the only thing that needs to happen. Maybe there can be some reduction of friction if it gets someone to, you know, notice something about a tree as they're walking past the tree, and it feels good and it feels beautiful, and their mind does something um, that doesn't feel stressful. It just feels a little bit like lightly different. I don't know. Okay, I've been talking too much. I'm sorry.
That reminds me, Kyle. We had Camila Janan Rashid come maybe 2 years ago now, and her practice of like scoring and sort of creating these like algorithmic, like analog algorithmic interventions and sort of like habit. Um,
Mm,
so like, whenever whenever like a leaf falls in your hair, you do something. There's sort of
yeah,
these contingencies of environment.
nice.
She had this whole like
And
scoring the
and
stack.
if then you might say,
Oh, exactly. Um, but it was a really lovely sort of project and something I've been thinking about in like the then small group that we've been running now for the last couple of weeks, is like creating kind of an analog mechanism for writing,
mm,
and kind of returning to the analog algorithm as a way of
Oh,
mm,
engaging.
yeah.
Um, I haven't come up with one that I feel like I like yet, but I'll keep everyone posted. Huda had her hand up. I think I saw if she's still here. Another sort of project of embodiment that I feel like in the same way that Jim's does, but in like this sort of I've been thinking a lot about like the relationship between like digital tools and then analog algorithms, and I've been sort of more drawn to the analog, frankly, in a lot
hmm
of spaces. Um, and maybe it's just because it's top of mind, but I did a workshop on Wednesday with an artist named Mary Yang, who has sort of like a similar kind of scoring approach, um, around kind of opening up sensory thinking in embodied writing. Like what she'll do is she'll
hmm
put out like oracle bone scripts or like kind of
hmm
unrecognizable what she calls latent characters, um and have people kind of like move like their character and then draw and write about it, to make sounds like their character and then draw and write about it, um to like tape out the gestures on the floor. And
mm,
I think maybe this is just a huge tangent, but the sort of primacy of embodiment with people seems to be put into much sharper relief, um as a result of these kind of like commercial LLMs. Um
mm.
and so I feel like that's kind of what I've been leaning into.
Kyle, the more I read about the book and the gems, it's just really fascinating. I'm in the field of rhetoric, and I was just reminded of a couple of full, well, there's group of people who work out of the notion of ambient rhetoric, which is kind of an offshoot of affect studies, but you got Thomas Rickard and I think it's McNally is his last name. There's a few others, but ambient seems to be kind of a backdrop if you wanted to hook this into rhetoric studies for what you're doing, where there's kind of a focus on the way in which, media create kind of they basically kind of entrain us to a set of possibilities, which we don't even recognize we've been kind of entrained or interpolated into.
Mm, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm not giving that idea justice, the ways in which it gets expanded on. But anyway, yeah, I really, really I'm enjoying reading, and trying to understand what you're doing with the book.
Thanks so much, David. Yeah, and that what you just said connects. Maybe I could connect it to what we were saying just a minute ago about difficulty and pleasure. I definitely did not feel like the infrastructure of the gyms faded into the background. It was, as I said, it was like um, uh, maybe out of some sense of like needing to do it, I would open up the gyms and work on the gyms, but it felt difficult. It felt um, painful at times. Um, and this idea of ambience um, and ambient processes that entrain you. Um, um, and John Cayley could, maybe John, you could talk about that in a different way too. Yeah, where does ambience live in our um, in this moment? Should we be trying to kind of do these things that trick ourselves into doing things? One of the quotes I've been thinking a lot about is from Nick Sieber, who's an anthropologist at Tufts, and he's written about infrastructure as traps that are being set for you. And I think that really speaks to what you just said, David, is kind of being entrained into certain ways of being. Um, that also sounds dangerous too. It sounds like you could forget about it and become uncritical or something, but it also sounds like it could become pleasurable and maybe, or at least consistently um, part of one's life in the way that, I've 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 put down a lot of the gyms because they are, as I said, they're not very um, there's a cost, there's a pain associated with it. So yeah. Yeah, Daniel. The how raises a good question. Is criticality antithetical to pleasure? So I think we're coming up on the hour. I'm happy to stay around and chat, but I'll just say, thank you to everyone um, for coming here to listen to my reading and then staying around to chat. And um, I'm eager to kind of go back through the chat and see all the comments that I missed.
Thank you, Kyle. There's some snaps, claps, hearts
Oh, cool.
filtering
That's
in.
great.
I'm
That's good.
curious, I'm sure you have, and I wonder, and I have some questions just about like your sort of process with this, and like um I think the sort of like thoughtfulness and politeness of this group meant that there were sometimes like silent moments and also just the digital moment of it all. And so folks picked up on that in the chat. Um, but I wonder, like, have you used this kind of conversational gym in like an in-person setting? And is that like, does it feel different? Um, are there like different sort of operations at play in that versus digital spaces that you've like experienced having done many of these?
This so this is my first attempt at doing one that's kind of collaborative. I don't know if it was, okay, Covey referred to it. Maybe it was ambient. Maybe it was just kind of in the background. But yeah, so for that reason, there are questions of like, I don't know, attention. Like, can you attend to a screen that's doing stuff while also attending to the chat? I'm looking at all of these different screens. This is one, I've given you one more screen. One kind of simple thing, the simplest gym in the entire book is the last one. It's one called Ambient Vocab App. And all it would do is at a different point of the day, text me to look around my world and use a fancy word that I didn't really, certainly not in my working vocabulary. Like, let's see, hexaity, um, syzygy, tokonoma. I don't know if I'm saying that right. These words that I don't really know about. So, and that was the easiest gym, the one that was kind of felt the most sustainable. That it would just be a kind of like, oh, I'm noticing something. I'm looking around my room, and oh, this thing does kind of look like a tokonoma, or that does kind of the structure does kind of resemble syzygy, or something like that. Um, so yeah, maybe that becomes a question of how you make something that you're going to want to use. I mean, that's another thing that's kind of looming over this question. I can create like a critical project like Jim's, but uh, you know, ChatGPT, you may have seen it's whatever the metrics are for likelihood of users to keep paying once they start paying. They're doing great. People who start paying for it do not stop paying for it, which is a sign that it's effortlessly, pleasurably becoming an intimate part of people's lives. That's the thing that I'm scared about trying to combat because I don't know if I can do it because for all sorts of reasons. Yeah. But I want to make myself want different things. That's maybe one way of summarizing the conversation. In gyms, I was able to make myself do different things, but I only partially was able to make myself want to do different things. I think those are really different things. And when we're talking about computational media, under capitalism, we should be thinking about desire and how our desires get formed and satisfied. I think. Like Sadie mentioned. That's a good one in the chat.
Yeah. So Kyle, can you hear me
Yeah,
now?
I can hear you.
I know we're wrapping up, and maybe I can just email you about this. But I had a question about lineage because, and this relates to, in some way to the danger. Well, both the potential and the dangers of AI and ChatGPT for knowledge and writing creation, because one of the things that people do or that students do or teachers try to inculcate through reading, and particularly through sort of virtuosic writing, poetry, novels, this kind of thing, is to inculcate a sense of lineage. And, of course, this is like a huge topic, but I mean, what is this kind of, and I'm not opposed to it. I think in particular for people who are isolated, who don't have that sense of lineage for various reasons in connection to canonical texts or, mainstream publishing or writing, whatever. It's perhaps useful. But I just wonder what kind of lineage you can have with a machine mediation. I mean, perhaps, as you said, distributed. You can have 1,000 lineages, right? And you don't actually have to deal with the institutional and racial and gender dynamics of authorship and authors. But I just wonder, what it is really that's going on around this, sort of, I guess we skirt around it a lot, this sort of identification processes, but in particular, not just identification, lineage.
So, do you mean lineage in terms of, a lineage of, okay, a poet operating in lineage of poets, or do you mean it in a broader sense?
Well, both. I mean, both. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
lineage is very much it's a part of, I mean, there's influence, but
Hmm.
there's also, which is a kind of broader, sort of, I think, more personalized way of talking about things. But lineage is sort of institutionally formed, right? It's part of institutional formations, and um,
Absolutely.
but that's intellectual. But then there's also heritage, you know,
Hmm.
um, and I don't know. You can say we respond to whichever aspect of it you wish. We don't. We have
Yeah. Yeah.
negative 5 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I, uh, I think that's a great question. The word that I tend to use instead of lineage is what Bernard Stiegler calls long circuits versus short circuits. And I really like how you drew attention with some ambivalence to the role, I think, to the role of institutions. Um, for Stiegler, it's the programming institutions like schools, like organized religion that have, you know, been totally usurped by the programming industries who are able to short circuit those intragenerational transfers by giving people what they want now prior to the cultivation of real desire to want something. Um, it's yeah, it's a distinction between this kind of actually wanting something because you've been kind of shaped and you've shaped yourself into the kind of person who would want this thing versus what the recommendation algorithm does when it just gives you um, the stupid thing that it knows maybe correctly will kind of have the right glimmer to catch your eye, and then it gives you more of that. So to me, it does kind of still come back to this question of desire. So there are moments where I felt like one of the things I was trying to do on like a good day at the gyms. So, around it's not really lineage, but I read from recursive ekphrasis gym, which is an opportunity to think about artworks. And so one of the things that I got out of it was, I'm looking at the artists I imagined artworks of Martin Puryear, um, Hendrik Goltzius, Rashid Arayin, Benny Beck. I read from Richard Serra, Helen Frankenthaler, um, Nancy Holt. These were, I think of myself as the kind of person who, in a sort of amateur way, I'm not an art historian, I like art. And yet, I when I'm online, the social media algorithm is giving me something else. So this was an opportunity to kind of put my money where my mouth is and to spend some time trying to forge some kind of imaginative affinity with these artworks and these artists that I, in some abstract sense, admire or feel affiliated with, or else I wouldn't have picked them to write about them. Yet in the kind of flow of everyday life, the kind of habits of mine just I wouldn't take the time to think about them. So that's one answer maybe to your question. The other one I would point to, that the other gym that I mentioned, I don't know if you were in the room when I was responding to Covey about um, being recommended allusions basically randomly from Wikipedia, which meant that some of them, and perhaps a preponderance of them, were um, um, from European history, let's say, and others really were not. And so I think of it also as I think of the question as how do you um, I would love to be able to not just reforge the old circuits, like paying attention to Milton. I like Milton. I would like to read Milton more, in my life. But I know I like Milton. I'm interested in like the maybe making those circuits in directions that are not the most not the canonical ones, not the ones that, um, a kind of recommender algorithm based on maybe certain features, demographic data it has about me, it would recommend to me. I would like to kind of have something that feels like lineage, but is also okay with being alienated. That's also interested in reaching out and thinking with, you know, some aspect of, for instance, Chinese history that I don't know at all about, if it could give me a kind of taste of my ignorance, but also an invitation to kind of reposition myself on kind of the many dimensional map of all that can be known. Does that make sense? Sort of, was that in the right direction of what you meant by
Yeah,
lineage?
yeah.
What do you think? Is that the wrong way to go about it? Or is there another kind of concept of lineage that we should be, because I think, I was repeating the kind of Stiegler take on it, because I really do I agree that the kind of evisceration of all sorts of lineages, that's exactly what's at stake, and in some sense has largely happened for a lot of people. Um, and that's bad. Um, how can the thing that short circuits us be used to rebuild long circuits? I guess would be the this way to ask that question in Stiegler's vocabulary.
Should we end it there? What a question to end on, Kyle.
Okay, I appreciate the question, and thanks so much. Uh, I'm gonna remember hexaity mentioned. Um, yeah, um, Scholasticism for sure, in the chat for sure. All right. Yeah, I guess we can, I can also just hang out and chat or debrief. I don't have to run anywhere right now. Thanks everyone for your thoughts and your questions and for sharing this time with me. And thank you so much, Carly.
Yeah,
You're a
thank you, Kyle.
fan.
What a treat.
It's a real treat for me.
I'm
The best
excited
part
to
was
like
getting to
I
talk to everyone.
know, I know. Really putting the experiment to work here, huh? All right, amazing, y'all. There is an open mic in about a month, or Alex and Dawn have hands raised. We can keep going. Dawn, and then Alex.
Hi, I'm Dawn. When you were talking about the Chinese history part, in some ways it felt very nebulous for me because, China has a history of 5,000 years.
Yeah, right.
So which like dynasty or which, period are you talking about? And
Yeah, no, that's a totally fair question, and that's a place where the gym failed to let me try something out. I can um I will read from uh, um maybe I should read from one because I know what you're getting at and you're absolutely right. There's a way in which this gym is emphasizing a kind of breadth first, it's not really a breadth first search, but it's a kind of um okay. Um maybe I'll just read, maybe I'll put it in the chat and then you can actually look at it and tell me if it makes any sense. And you can also I cut you off. I'm sorry, Don. But I'll try to find a little bit of the
I was just thinking that as someone that's my heritage. But the
right,
the thing with Chinese history is a lot of it is written by men. I'm a woman, so you
right.
know, even the records, are they really accurate? Because it's
That's a
not,
good point.
it's also gender and racialized and it's written by, when you think about China, China has enough ethnic minorities who are not Han.
Right, right,
It's really written by people who are in power or who have like the historians. When you say history, I'm thinking about like, imperial court. They have these like historians who keep records. But then there are also things that are not kept in the records. So what's missing from the record? So if you're getting something from Wikipedia, you're getting something, I guess, that's in the record already.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just put in the chat um one one more poem. The capitalized stuff is from Wikipedia. Um, the formatting got a little bit messed up, but I think it's followable. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess there are two different things that if I'm thinking about like what cognitive, what's the right word? What happened in my mind while writing this poem? I certainly did not become an expert about any of the things, whether um, um, whether it's um, the king of the eight kingdoms of Middle Heaven. Learned basically nothing about this person. Um, learned basically nothing about Madonna of the Cat. There would be these moments of kind of feeling some anxiety, but also some delight of just, I don't know, realizing how little I know. I totally agree with you. There's something hugely problematic about certainly assuming that Wikipedia is at all complete or unbiased. On the other hand, it is so big and in some sense diverse with so many things that I don't know about, just personally. So many things that I don't know about. I'm at such maybe you could say I'm at such a low level of knowledge about so many things in the universe that just even I don't even know what I don't know. And so I feel like these, you know, I don't think I would do any better on a quiz about any of these things that I wrote about, probably. But what's left in my mind is something like a gap, something like it becomes, okay, this is to use like, try to use like Rumsfeld terminology, but it's like it becomes, goes from an unknown unknown to a known unknown. Um, and I feel like I have a better, there's something there. I don't know what happens after that. That would be a design question, and an interesting one. How do you go to the next step? How do you make this more serious? How do you make it so it's not this kind of cursory, kind of dilettante-ish hopping through Wikipedia? One, I don't think I'm at the level yet to have your sort of critical relationship to the history for a thousand reasons, but maybe there's a next step. That would be the next step on that journey. I don't know what that gym, if it's a gym, would look like. Um, does that make sense to you? It's like thinking of starting points and thinking of how you like you have to start somewhere. I don't know. Even if the place is imperfect, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I would just say that I myself am not a Chinese historian, so there may be things that if it's very specific, I will know. I might have a general idea, oh, this happened during this dynasty, or yeah, I've heard of it, but the details, may be murky for me as well.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. There was a question that was rolling around. There's a question rolling around in the conversation, Jim, that was something about educational technology. Um, and we're in this moment where there is a great deal of capital investment, but also just research investment. Like people in human computer interaction are thinking a lot about what it means to learn with AI. Um, uh, Part of me wonders, by being so artistic, by letting this be a kind of poetry project, am I in some sense letting myself off the hook? And what I really um, need to do is drop poetry. I need to think about this as, educational software, and be more serious about that as a goal with all the limitations that would imply. Part of the reason why it's poetry is because poetry is at least fun. And there were moments I described it as grueling, and it was, but there are at least moments where I would put a couple words together and be like, yeah, hell yeah, that's pretty good. That's better than I would have done otherwise. Those are the best words I did today. So there was that kind of pleasure keeping me going a little bit. But at the same time, maybe there's something about poetry that, uh, you know, takes some pressure off, or allows things to be in kind of quotation marks, like, oh, I'm writing about history, but in this kind of, no, what if I had a test? What if I really did have a test? Or what if I had to, uh, at the very least, talk with someone, and, about these things, um, and have a conversation. And that would be a very different sort of gym than a poetry gym. Just a, just a thought I'm having right now.
Alex?
Hi, can you hear me?
Hey, Alex. Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, my name is Alex, and my question was about like how you constructed this gym. So, like how you were able to like create and like build this gym, and like, if you're comfortable sharing like what kind of like framework you were using. I'm a CS undergrad, so like that's actually like the first place like my attention shifted. And I'm not sure like if I had a part in the question about educational technology you mentioned, but I was actually, this might not be a question, but I actually felt like the gym you introduced could also be used to sort of train myself to think about creative ways to use like what I code, and or
Mm.
sort of subvert like the risks of like using relying on large language models that I'm feeling, because like I feel it has a tendency to like flatten everything into whatever like might drive the most engagement, or like whatever people tend to associate like the most. And I really like how this is taking on that tendency and inverting it into actually like expand out of an echo chamber. But yes, I was primarily curious how you like the curious about like the building process of like this gym.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Alex, for your question. Yeah, so it's I think all of them are uh, just Python and the standard
Yeah,
um, the standard NLP libraries that one uses with Python, including NLTK,
yeah.
Spacey, Gensim or Gensum. I never know how to say it. Um, uh, Maybe some other ones, maybe one for like TF-IDF or something. All those like um, those things that were kind of cool, that felt cutting, that felt powerful like 10, 15 years ago. And now they feel, that's my experience with doing this sort of work, is starting out thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is so powerful. Look, I can part of speech tag this text, and then I can get all the nouns, and I can figure out what the most common nouns are. This is wild. I never knew I could, this is an amazing power. And now, of course, actually programming and like doing, um, you know, starting out with your pipeline being part of speech tagging. No, of course not. Uh, of course the LLM is this much more flexible and, yeah, sure, powerful way of manipulating language and generating language. But yeah, I think I
Mhm.
totally agree with you, and I know a lot of people agree with you, Alex, about the flatness. And so yeah, I feel like I wish. Well, here's a question for you: Are people? So you said you're a CS undergrad. Are people still interested in like doing something with maybe using Spacey or NLTK even to do some kind of good old fashioned NLP type stuff, or is that just not even something that people care about at all? I feel a little bit like a dinosaur when I feel like this, I'm so old fashioned in a way. Um, yeah, is
I would say that like these things are still relevant because the larger language models like take up a lot of computing resources, so that's like
hmm
not always feasible. And
right,
it like sometimes like there is a trade-off where like the resources it's consuming is like not accessible to some people, or it's not like worth the effect its intended effect it's producing. But
right.
um
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And also just in my interactions with LLMs, I feel like I'm constantly drawing on a lot of my interactions end up having a kind of vibe coding feeling, which works once you can code, basically. Once you can figure out like, oh, what would be a reasonable data structure for the LLM to return this to me, how should I instruct it to parse this data? The more it approximates coding, often the better it is. So I wonder, yeah, I, this is one of my anxieties kind of behind the project too, is like the kind of the fate of thinking about language from the very weird and wonky perspective that old school, like on the one hand, like natural language processing, and on the other, just computer generated computer art as it relates to language. We mentioned Alison Parrish, um, Montfort, Stephanie Strickland's here, John Kelly's here, see Howe is here, Robert Moore's here. Um, you know, um, People who are using code to think about language in this very not quite human but wonderful way. And yeah, I'm not saying something new by saying, the LLM is all too human, but gosh, I wish there were a way for more people to kind of in their encounters with AI have something that feels a little bit more like defining functions in a Jupyter notebook using um, NLTK or whatever. Like it forces you into a different way of thinking about language. And to be even more specific about it, I feel like one of the things that doing this in a non-LLM way made me do was think very specifically about what was wrong with my language and how it needed to improve, and maybe where's the, overlap between what needs to be improved and what possible solutions can be proffered by this very fairly rudimentary, compared to an LLM code using BASIC or an LTK or whatever.
Yeah, more
It
control
required us,
over the outcome.
yeah, more control for sure. And and also I had to be more specific and like really think about it. I couldn't just say, tell me 5 things that are wrong with something I wrote. That's something that, it would be very easy. Give me 5 places where my text could be improved. That's something it's a totally reasonable thing to do with your LLM, but it actually, to your point about flattening, it doesn't require you to kind of mobilize or develop your own opinions about what's wrong with your this project was about like what's wrong with me. What's the right way to even frame that as a question, and the coding about it ended up being I think a really powerful, this is like kind of doesn't get into the text itself, but just an opportunity for me to think about my own mind and its limitations, with a specificity that I don't think I would have had to. And if I did this project, if I did the LLM version of GEMS, it would have been different and a little bit fuzzier, not as specific in that way. That would have been a trade-off for sure. Yeah, collaborations. Interesting question. How are we doing, Carly? I don't want to keep you.
No, you're good. I think I've got to run now. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna save this chat, Kyle.
Yeah,
And
I would love to read. I didn't really, I was kind of,
yeah, there were some really, really thoughtful comments and in like sort of relationship interactions happening in the chat. So I'll save it for you and send it. I'll also put this up this
cool,
recording up on the archive. But yeah,
cool.
thank you, Kyle. What a
Thank you.
whew. I was telling Kyle before this, I had like 15 events that I like had some hand in over the last 2 weeks, and this is my last
Mm,
last one.
Uh,
Um,
Congratulations to you.
but we've made it. I'm really
Yeah.
pleased with this, and I was like, ooh, wow, we saved like a very strenuous one for last. But I feel like while you were talking about your gym's thing, your gym like sort of practice, um, I was like, what is the equivalent of like a runner's high for using these
Right.
poetry?
Yeah. Right.
And
And well,
I think I kind of have it. I don't know.
yeah, you definitely have it. Just, because yeah. So you've been in so I think the distinction would be between aerobic and anaerobic.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is under theorized in the Jim's project for another day.
For another day. All right. Thanks, y'all. I think during this session our open mic slots filled up, but like
Cool.
I hope everyone comes and supports.
Yeah,
Um
you'll send out reminders about that.
yeah, yeah. You'll get emails
Yeah,
from me. Um
awesome.
all right. I hope everyone
Thank you so
enjoys their
much, Carly.
Friday afternoon.
Yeah, have a good Friday,
Take
everyone. Have a
care,
good
y'all.
weekend.
Really good to see
Thank
you.
you.
And Foreste has if anyone is migrating from Glitch, they're hosting a co-working session on Sunday, which is just scroll up a little bit in the chat, and I think you posted about it on Discord too, Foreste. Um, but that will be amazing. Okay, I'll
Don,
see you.
Don's last comment, thinking about a Chinese Milton. That's for me, that's a good comment to end on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. All right.
See you all. Thanks,
Appreciate y'all.
everyone.
Take care. See you in a month.